The Adulting with ADHD podcast is not a substitute for medical advice. Please see a medical professional if you think you have ADHD or have ADHD and need additional assistance. For podcast archives, please visit patreon.com/adultingwithadhd. This is the Adulting with ADHD podcast, self-empowerment for people with ADHD. Today, I talked to Stephanie Scheller, an entrepreneur with ADHD who specializes in space design for neurodivergent professionals. Through her events agency, Grow Disrupt, Stephanie develops educational and inspirational events, especially for ADHD adults. It was super interesting to learn about Stephanie's approach, and I took several learnings away from this for my own home office. Without further ado, meet Stephanie. So, Stephanie, can you share some examples of how specific elements in space design, like room layout or lighting, have proven effective in managing ADHD during these events?
Yes, I'm excited you asked the question because those was one of the things, right? So my whole event process started with I wanted to create an event where the event was the product, where people didn't have to buy additional coaching and consulting on the back end. And I realized in order to do that, I had to keep these people focused, which was proving to be very difficult to do because unknowingly I had accidentally attracted all these ADHD people. But I did start to notice, and it's really funny because over like 18, 19, 20, I started like just testing things out and finding what was working and what wasn't. And then it wasn't really till 2021 and 2022 that I started to find like there's actual studies behind this stuff. So for example, ceiling height, which is a weird one, but we always have, as often as we possibly can, we will do really, really tall ceilings in the main room where we're doing like the ideation and the creation and we're having conversations because higher ceilings, individuals they found with higher ceilings will think more creatively.
Wow.
So we'll put people in the breakout rooms in a lower ceiling room, or we'll make the room feel smaller so that it's easier to focus. So ceiling height, which then like in my own office, I just tell people like I literally like build pillow forts when I really have to focus because like it lowers my ceiling because I have these cathedral ceilings, so I can't really like do anything. I always joke I forgot to install the level changing ceiling when I moved in.
Right.
So ceiling height's one. Other things like room layout, lighting. So other things, lighting. This one's always been really interesting to me. And you can cut in and shut me up and move on,
Yeah.
or
Okay, sure.
whenever you want to.
Yeah.
So we have also found having lighting that bounces off the walls too direct. So we'll put lights right up against the walls so it bounces off. We try to avoid having overhead lights because it's actually incredibly harsh on people's eyes because then you have a shadow over what you're looking at down on your
That's true.
plate, right, where you're taking notes.
Mhm.
So we try to avoid overhead lights as much as possible. We try to lean on daylight, and then we will have these lights that are bouncing off the walls that is then pulling people's attention towards the front of the room.
Wow.
So I don't know that anyone can see this, but like you can see it in my office here. I've got the lights right up against the wall. So it creates kind of a dark, almost like a pathway of darkness right up against the lights, but then it bounces off and pulls the attention forward. And it's really, really funky. But we found that just having these lights that move people's attention towards the front of the room also makes a huge difference in just keeping them focused all day long, which like, these are such weird things. You don't think they're going to work, and then they do, and they make such a difference. And so
nice.
That nerdy excited.
Yeah, that is so next level. So that you might have just answered number 2, but I'll ask it. What's one aspect of space design that people often overlook but can significantly impact ADHD adults? I mean,
okay, so I actually, you sent me these questions in advance and I have a different one for this because this is something no one thinks about. And we actually fell into this one by accident. So I'll tell you the story and then I'll explain the answer. So what happened was this was early 2022. And I just remember I walked out of my office, I went into the bathroom, and there was like this like Body Works body spray like sitting on the counter that I hadn't even paid attention to. It's just been sitting there forever. And I saw it and I looked at it, and my at the time, boyfriend had got it for me like on our very first date. And I just remember picking it up off the counter and like being like, oh, I remember I love how this smells. And I took off the cap and I smelled it. And like I had like this instant flashback to that Bath and Body Works that exact evening. It was rainy outside. It was nice and warm and glowing. I could
Oh,
see the layout of the space. I could see my boyfriend at the time. I remembered we went to, and it was like this like almost like in the movies moments of like a flashback.
yeah.
And I had this idea of like, okay, wait. So we know scent is closely tied to memory. What if, and this is where it started for me, what if we could come up with a custom scent for our events that we could then pipe into the room at the event and then send home with people so that when they're working on their business throughout the year, all they need to do to kind of remember what they learned at the event is smell this scent. So that's where it started. And then we had our flagship event in January 2022, the Grow Retreat, and we had a psychologist, a neuroscientist, sorry, he came to the event,
Mhm.
and after the event, he comes to me and goes, "We need to talk." And I said, "Okay." And he said, I don't think you know what you just did. He's like, basically, you just Pavlov trained your entire audience. And I was like, well, that wasn't intentional, but cool. And what he explained is he's like, so what you did was you spent 2 days teaching these people that this scent, like you gave them really steady, stable, healthy drips of dopamine for 2 days. So you used this scent to teach people like this scent is a dopamine releaser in the brain, which means since dopamine is the trigger that moves us from focus mode to create mode, right? Which is one of the issues we with ADHD have is the inability to switch between these two modes in the brain. He was like, you literally gave them like the magic switch.
Oh my
So
God.
what I've learned to do with people is pick a scent that is your work scent. Pick a scent that is your home scent and just start using that one scent. And citrus and herb notes are really great for working scents because they support focus, they support energy, but pick a scent, a candle or a diffuser or something, and have that be your work scent. And what you'll find, what I've found is having a scent that is my work scent, right? That I turn on moves my brain almost instantly into like actual focus work mode. And it takes so much of the stress out of me having to have a routine and have a this and do this and bend over backwards and jump up and down one foot while tapping my tummy and rubbing my head like to get myself in focus mode. And so this
Yeah.
this idea of scent in space, it's ridiculous, it's so cool, and it's probably one of the biggest game changers ever.
I'm totally thinking about my morning yesterday and 4 hours down the drain doing the dance that you're talking about, and I can't wait to try this. That is so cool. Our
It's
listeners are
so
gonna get so
fun.
much out of this episode. They're gonna freak out. So,
Oh, I
and
hope it helps. It takes a minute to
yeah,
train the brain on it, right? Like, you have
right.
to pick the scent and then use it consistently, but, like, at some point, all of a sudden, it clicks, right? And then it's like, "Oh, okay," like, our scent, I do the train you come to our events, I train your brain for you, but at home,
Yeah.
you can still train your brain. It just is gonna take it's so cool. And people come to me, they're like, "I did not think it was gonna actually help, but it does."
I'll take it, man. I'll try everything. It's fine. If you're listening to this show, you get how stress and overwhelm can wreak havoc on your life, and how sometimes the issue runs deeper than that. That's where ADHD Online comes in. They offer a thorough, clinically backed assessment that not only checks for ADHD, but also screens for anxiety, depression, and more. To save $40 and to get on the path to relief now, visit ADHDonline/adulting with ADHD and use promo code adultingadhd40. Well,
So, there's a As aside aside from the scent and the lighting and there one of the things that we do very intentionally with our space design is, there's a handful of things that we do very intentionally here. I'm gonna touch on 2 of them. One of them is, and people don't even they know I do it because I talk about this now, but when we finish setting up the room, I walk through the room and I literally sit down in every single seat to make sure they have a clear line of sight to the stage.
wow.
I don't want people having to twist. I don't want people having to lean over people. And the reason for that, and being applicable beyond events, right? Because I always try and help people understand how to apply this stuff beyond like I don't want people to be like, oh, I have to come to Steph's event. Like, that's not the goal here.
Right.
But the point of this being, I've learned that if I can help limit physical fatigue, they have more energy mentally.
Oh,
So
yeah.
eliminating physical fatigue of having to twist in your chair, or eliminating the physical fatigue of having to move around and try and see around people. So when you're setting up like workspace, it comes down to becoming aware of, what do I have set up in my workspace that is wearing me out? Is my chair like causing problems for me? My feet, like, am I having my feet too, they're dangling towards the floor, which is then pulling my forward, which is then causing me to slouch, which is then causing a whole lot of physical fatigue throughout the day. So now I don't have the mental energy. Um, so that's one. And then the other thing that we do in space design that's had a remarkable effect on retention and application is we actually are very, very intentional about making sure there is no clutter in sight. Because what we found, and again, this is a lot of like, we want the brain freed up to focus on the material, on the content. And what we found is that the brain recognizes the clutter. And I think most of us with ADHD are really great about clutter, like as in having clutter.
Yeah. It's our superpower.
um, but because we deal with this thing called change brain blindness in the brain, right?
Yeah.
Even when we aren't consciously recognizing the clutter is there, it's still eating away at the amount of energy that is available in the brain to focus. So at our events, like, we look through and everything gets clear. Everything is in boxes and bins, wires are organized, stuff is pulled back from the stage. Like, we make sure there's really no clutter visible. And then at my office, I do the same thing. So at least once a week, I clear off my entire desk and make sure I have like a clutter bin that's below the desk so that everything just gets swept down there. And then I go through it once a month and throw away all the things I forgot are in the bin. And then I try to clean up at the end of every day, just reorganize and clean up the clutter, because I don't want my brain being pulled into having to deal with, clutter that I'm not even recognizing as existing there for me.
I can't wait to fix my office after this conversation. I'm so excited to hear all this because I do all the
I'm
thi-
super excited.
I do all the things, and then it's like, why is this still so hard? So this really feels like I I I really never put thought into how much it takes out of you. All these things, like, it takes so much out of you without you being aware of it. That is so fascinating.
It really
Yeah.
I love you hit on that, because that's the biggest thing. As I think a lot of times we are fighting so hard as individuals with ADHD, and this is just me kind of theorizing here, but
Sure.
I feel like sometimes we are fighting so hard to deal with the upfront issues. Like, okay, I need to focus more, that we're forgetting all of the little things that are making it either harder or easier. And it's this, like, just setting up your space. I know it's not a silver bullet by any means, like,
Right.
for
Yeah.
finding there's no such thing as a silver bullet, but I feel like it goes such a long ways. I did a training a couple of weeks ago for a bunch of people. I've already had people reaching out going, "I just changed my lighting and I am so much more focused. I just changed X and I can't believe what a difference it makes." So it's it's really wild that, like, if you just set up your space intentionally, it can make that much of a difference for you. And so I'm excited to hear how it changes for your office and what it changes for you too.
Yeah, I'll have to let you know. So, what are the key considerations when designing a space intended for individuals with ADHD based on your experience and research?
So I'm going to, again, I'm trying to tackle all of these from like a couple of different angles here. I think in terms of general space design, right? Not necessarily event space design, although I do have to try and keep this in mind with our events. But one of the things that I have learned is that, especially for individuals with ADHD, what works for one person isn't always what works for another person. Like, I recommend colored lights because you find the color combination that really helps for your focused brain, right? So like, if again, you can see I've got, a blue light, a purple light, and an orange light going on in the background. This is the combination that really kind of helps put my brain in focus mode. If I need to, I can change the colors, but it's really about finding what works for you. We've had to, with our events, become very conscious that what works for one person doesn't always work for another person.
Mhm.
And so it's funny. It's not funny, but it's always interesting to me to watch how someone will come up to me at an event and be like, "Oh my gosh, I see that you did this little tiny thing that no one else even noticed." Like, um, you had tables at the back of the room for people who needed to stand up, like the cocktail tables where people could go stand up at the back of the room to keep working and taking notes. And like 85% of the room won't even notice that. But then like the 15% of the room that it matters to, it really matters to them. So when it comes to designing a space intended for individuals with ADHD, collect as much information as you can. Stuff like clearing the clutter, like using lighting to be very intentional with where you're directing your attention, getting your sense. But keep in mind that you have to find what works for you. Every one of us, our lived experience is a little bit different. ADHD comes so often with coexisting diagnoses that everyone has a little bit of a different way of engaging with the world. So try the things that seem like they're going to work. If they don't work, that's fine. Let it go and move on. Don't turn this into a, well, Steph said this worked, so now I have to beat myself up because it doesn't seem to be working for me. Like, just let it go and keep moving, right? I would say that's probably the most universally key consideration there.
Yeah, 100%. So, what would be the first step someone could take to adapt their personal or professional space to better manage their ADHD symptoms?
I think the first step is going to be just taking, actually just stepping back and like doing a self-awareness scan or an analysis scan of like what is working and what is not working. So, especially inside of a workspace area, what is going on that is causing physical strain for you? Maybe your lighting is not working for you. Maybe your desk is not the right height. Maybe your chair is not the right height. But if you've got anywhere that you are adding physical strain to yourself when you're trying to be in focus mode, it's going to backfire. And I know there's some people who like to argue with me on this one and be like, well, sometimes having a little bit of physical strain helps make you sharper. I'm like, yeah, but not long term. Like, I could see their argument point, but especially if you're like trying to set up a working space, identify what areas are stressing you out and causing physical strain. I would start with clearing the clutter, like get the clutter out of the way. And then I would recommend, we haven't even talked about this, but getting some greenery or getting some nature in there. There again, we've got some studies that showcase that looking at man-made items tends to stress the brain out, whereas looking at nature and greenery actually calms the brain and relaxes the brain. So I have a little like garden area over here that when I'm having a really challenging time, I will actually go sit on my little couch and I will just kind of look at my little garden area for a few minutes. I have greens and stuff behind me because again, I want to make sure that I'm giving my brain something to relax with, so that it's not always in that uptight mode. So that was probably more than a first few steps, but start with the self-analysis and then go
I
from there.
I love it, man. This mental list I'm making right now, I cannot wait to work on my office. To that end, can you recommend any resources or tools for our listeners who are interested in exploring space design like this further?
So I really need to work on this because everything I have is a whole bunch of studies that have been like this study from over here and this study
Mm.
from over here and this study from that. There's nothing that really like combines all of this together. So we're working on that. We have not yet gotten that released.
Yeah.
What I would recommend is um right now, probably the best way to try and keep exploring that would be to check out my company website, the Grow Disrupt website, and get on the mailing list because I send out tips. So every other week, I send out tips on like how to manage your ADHD using the stuff that we've learned for our events. But also when I finally do get like an actual like resource or ebook or whatever I decide to do on this one put together, that will be the list that will get notified that that's ready to go because I don't know of anyone else talking about this right now. So I don't have a better option for that right this second.
Yeah, I don't either. That's incredible. Stephanie, thank you so much for being on the show. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you online? You mentioned your website. Are you on anything else where they can link up?
Yeah. So the company website is growdisrupt.com, like grow your business in a new and disruptive way, or So that's the company website. I spend way too much time on on LinkedIn and on TikTok, honestly, although I don't post on TikTok. I just stalk TikTok. But I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, just under Stephanie Scheller. If someone wants to learn more about me, like as an individual, I have my personal website, which is thestephaniescheller.com, like the one and only. And there are links to all of, I think, my social media on that site as well. And people can get a hold of me in the contact form there. And I love talking about this stuff. So people who have questions, like, bring it on. I would love to have these conversations.
Wonderful, Stephanie. Well, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me on. I'm super glad we got to talk about this and hopefully give some people beyond just you with now your overflowing ideas. Hopefully we have some additional listeners with some cool new ideas too.